Today, I'm going to be ranking and tier listing every single killer's teachable perks. So, if you're newer to killer, or just curious about which killers have the best perks in the game, this video is going to have everything you're going to need. At number 36, we have the Skull Merchant, and it's pretty much impossible to argue for anyone else. Her perks are, on average, the lowest pick perks in the entire game, simply because of how useless they are. Thwack can make you see some auras nearby when breaking a pallet after you get a hook, just way too many conditions to get any use out of. Game of Foot gives you slight haste after breaking a pallet, which doesn't even do anything for the Singularity, and Leverage shouldn't even be considered anti-healing, it's so terrible. Don't get the Skull Merchant. At number 35, we have Wraith, who is barely better because he has a perk that could maybe kind of get value if the team has flashlights. Shadowborn gives 10% haste after being blinded, but then Predator and Bloodhound completely negate this and leave Wraith in the dumpster tier. You won't even notice their effects in a game. Huntress is coming in at the 34 spot, but you could argue she has a slight edge over our next killer. Territorial Imperative can get some value on those basement-dwelling Sable mains showing their auras. Huntress Lullaby can increase the amount of progress lost when survivors fail skill checks, but Beast of Prey is legitimately just the worst perk in the game, so she's gonna be low no matter what. Next up, we have Freddy. Blood Warden is a funny meme perk that you might get value out of 1 out of 100 games. Remember Me can slow down the gate speed after you hit the obsession 4 times, but why not just prevent endgame with some decent perks? And Fire Up is just horrible. If you want break speed from this perk, just run Brutal Strength. At 32, we have Dredge, who has Septic Touch, and I'm not even sure what the devs had in mind with this perk. He also has Darkness Revealed, which even Huntress can barely get value from, even though she opens lockers constantly, and Dissolution, which is a super niche chase perk that gets solid value on only a handful of killers. Number 31 is Oni, and he's only this high because he has Blood Echo, one of the very few anti-exhaustion perks killers have access to. Zanshin, the killer equivalent to Windows of Opportunity, is completely useless as the survivor determines where they'll run next in chase, even though some unhinged lunatics will try and convince you otherwise. And Nemesis could maybe fit somewhere in a meme build, but just changing Obsession for being stunned is an awful perk. Pyramidhead is at number 30, as Force Penance and Trail of Torment are not completely useless. Force Penance can punish survivors body blocking, rendering them unable to heal. Deathbound is an awful perk that makes someone oblivious for a bit after healing a teammate. And Trail of Torment, while a fun undetectable perk, is completely outclassed by a perk that our next killer has. And that is going to do it for our F tier. Number 29 is the Unknown, who is one of the most recent releases. However, his perks are pretty much all complete losers. Unbound gives 5% haste after vaulting a window on a huge cooldown, and if that was 50% like Survivor's Lithe, I'd say this perk would be awesome. Unforeseen, an upgrade from Trail of Torment that puts the killer's terror radius on a generator, and Undone, which is legitimately the worst slowdown perk in the entire game. At the 28 spot is the Legion, who only have one good perk. Iron Maiden is completely useless now that Huntress and Trickster reload faster base kit. Mad Grit is a meme perk to swing over and over while carrying survivors, but they also have Discordance, my personal favorite info perk, which shows when 2 or more survivors are on a gen together, although survivors may never group on a gen in your games. Next up is Nurse at 27. The Nurse has Nurse's Calling, which can allow you to see survivors healing in a decent range, the Nanophobia, which is a slowdown only really usable on Legion and Plague, and Strider, which is getting a nice buff and acts as a small counter to Iron Will. Overall, not the worst perks, but there are just better options across the board. At 26, we have Myers, who has a nerfed Save the Best for Last, which is still a decent perk on a couple killers who need that extra love and chase. Play with your food to give haste after losing chase with the Obsession, which takes way too long to build up to get any good use out of. And Dying Light, which is probably the second worst slowdown perk in the game. Overall, he's worth it for save, and that's about it. At the 25 spot, we have Singularity, who has Forced Hesitation, a perk that can definitely be useful at tunneling survivors or destroying teams who hook trade. Genetic Limits, another awful anti-exhaustion perk. And Machine Learning, which recently got buffed, but is simply so strange to use that I doubt you'll ever see any real value from. For number 24, we have Blight, who realistically has one perk you'll use: Undying. This perk is the only perk in the game that allows you to get any value from your hexes. However, Blood Favor without Undying can simply be deactivated 10 seconds into a match, and Dragon's Grip requires you to sit in the area of a gen and pray someone touches it in a very narrow window to get any value. Number 23 is Wesker, who just has mediocre perks across the board, but none are complete garbage. Superior Anatomy makes you vault windows a lot faster, which can get some crazy hits. Permanence makes all injured survivors broken in endgame so they cannot heal or pop adrenaline. And Awakened Awareness, which lets you see all nearby survivors while carrying. Overall, Overall, the perks are not bad when used in combination with other perks, but there are simply better options to replace them with. At number 22, we have Vecna. Weave Attunement is getting a lot of hype from some people, thinking the combination with Franklin's is super strong. And while the info is nice, experienced killers don't really need this, as they can heavily rely on their game sense. He also has Languid Touch, which has the potential to be a real anti-exhaustion perk if behavior removes the 20-second cooldown, and Dark Arrogance, which you'll probably never see used in a game, as it makes pallets stun the killer for longer. That is going to do it for our D tier. Twins are coming in at the 21 spot with only one real perk, but this perk is super fun. Coup de grace. This perk allows M1 killers to get ridiculous hits that would never ever happen, and it is the only reason the twins are this high. Hoarder shows when survivors pick items up, which is just a super strange one, and although Oppression just got buffed, it is such a mediocre slowdown option that I can't justify putting twins any higher. Number 20 is the Trickster, who has probably the best endgame perk in the game. No Way Out. This perk blocks the gate switches in endgame for a full minute, allowing the killer to try to turn the game back in their favor. He also has Starstruck, which makes survivors in your terror radius exposed while carrying a survivor, which can make some scary builds with Deathslinger and Spirit. And Crowd Control, which is an underrated hex, blocking all Windows survivors' vault for 60 seconds. Number 19 is Pig, which might catch some people off guard because she also has one of the worst perks in the game. Hangman's Trick, which shows survivors very close to hooks while carrying a survivor. However, she also has Make Your Choice, which will expose a survivor who unhooks for 60 seconds. Along with Surveillance, which in the current meta is probably the best gen info perk in the entire game. She probably would have been lower earlier this year, but with behavior forcing killers into choices like Ruin now, her perks got a lot better. At number 18, we have Chucky, who doesn't have anything insanely meta, but they can all be useful. Batteries included gives 5% haste when near a completed generator, which can be fun for some endgame builds. Friends Till the End exposes the obsession and shows their aura when you hook somebody, which can be fun combined with other stuff. And he also has the worst hex in the game. 2 can play, which blinds a survivor for a second and a half when they stun you. I'm not really sure why they even made this. Number 17 is Billy, with only one perk that has stood the test of time, but it is amazing. Enduring cuts the duration of pallet stuns in half, which is awesome and feels great on so many killers. Although Lightborn is actually a debuff to killers because survivors will simply stop wasting time trying to blind you. But Tinkerer is still a pretty solid info perk, and Hillbilly does come with the game. It's just outclassed by other options. Coming in at 16 is the Spirit, who has 3 really solid, useful perks. Spirit Fury makes the next pallet that stuns you break after you kick 2 of them. Haunted Ground spawns 2 hexes that will expose all survivors if they're cleansed, making survivors second guess whether they should cleanse the totems or not. And Rancor shows all survivors after each completed generator and also exposes the obsession in endgame. Overall, she does have some really solid perks, but nowhere near the best. Number 15 is the Doctor, and that feels a bit high to me, but because of 2 perks, I simply can't put him any lower. Now, Overwhelming Presence makes items deplete faster in the killer's terror radius, which is not very good at all. But Monitor has some influences on the killer's terror radius, which can be super interesting when combined with certain killers or perks like Infectious. And Overcharge can destroy generators if survivors fail the skill check. Overall, again, not bad, but there's much better coming soon. Number 14 is the Alien, who would have been higher not too long ago, but behavior gutted one of his perks, Ultimate Weapon. This perk still isn't bad for information, but it was so good combined with Dead Man's Switch, and too many people whined about it on Twitter, so it was changed to what it is now. However, Rapid Brutality is still left as a pretty decent chase perk to help M1 killers. And Alien Instinct is another throwaway perk showing the farthest injured survivor after hooking someone, just a way worse barbecue and chili. And that is going to wrap up the C tier. The Onryo is going to be taking over the 13th spot with some awesome options. Merciless Storm is really only used on Doctor. However, Call of Brine is still a great option for people kicking generators, as it offers a little extra slowdown and great info. And Floods of Rage can be a really nice aura reading perk with certain combos and mobile killers or Huntress. Number 12 is going to Nemesis for 1 perk. Lethal Pursuer. The info this perk gives you can completely change the game, allowing you to hone in on an area you see multiple survivors and extend other perks or reading. Eruption used to be very good, but with the new limit on gen damages, this perk has suffered a lot. And Hysteria is an interesting perk and concept that makes survivors oblivious throughout the match, but it just doesn't work with all the insane healing stuff. At number 11 is surprisingly Ghostface. Furtive Chase used to be a complete joke, but now is actually really fun, especially when combined with Chucky's perk Friends Till the End. He also has Thrilling Tremors, which is phenomenal combined with Dead Man's Switch. And I'm All Ears, which can eliminate mind games on certain tiles and is super powerful on killers like Nurse or ranged killers. And coming in at the 10 spot is Knight, who actually has 3 OK perks, which is pretty rare. Hubris exposes survivors who stun the killer, which can make for some super fun builds with Spirit Fury or killers who can play around pallets. Face to Darkness is a safe hex that can provide a ton of info, and Nowhere to Hide, which a lot of killers love to use, showing the auras of all nearby survivors after kicking a gen, which can get some insane value on the top tier killers. At number 9, we have Trapper, who has very simple and basic perks, but they do their jobs extremely well. Now, Unnerving Presence is definitely the most underwhelming of the 3, making it so survivors get more frequent skill checks in the killer's tear radius. But Agitation, allowing you to get survivors to hook much farther and faster, is invaluable. And I do hope someday it's incorporated into killers' base kits, with all the base kit buffs survivors have gotten recently. Also, the Trapper has Brutal Strength, making breaking all the pallets on these insane new maps a little bit easier, and also kicking generators and walls faster. Our final killer in the B tier is Deathslinger, who I could almost argue for an A placement. Dead Man's Switch is an amazing perk combined with certain killers like Artist and Doctor, but also pairs extremely well with screaming perks like Pain Resonance. Gearhead is a severely underrated aura reading perk, showing survivors who hit good skill checks, and Retribution, which shows the auras of all survivors after a survivor cleanses a hex totem. Super valuable stuff, but here is where it gets universally good. First up in the A tier is Bubba at number 7. Even though Knockout is more of a solo queue stomper than anything, you can make some crazy slug builds with this perk that survivors will absolutely hate. He also has Barbecue and Chili, a great perk to keep momentum after hooking a survivor, and Franklin's, which combines extremely well with the new overhyped Weave Attunement, knocking items out of survivors' hands and completely depleting them so they can't even be used. At number 6, we have the Demogorgon, who has the only somewhat reliable anti-exhaustion perk in the game. Mindbreaker. Forcing survivors to be exhausted for 5 seconds after touching a gen can be very useful on stealth killers, as the survivors don't have time to walk for 5 seconds to get their sprinty perks back. It's also super useful on mobility killers who can get to the gens quickly. He also has Surge, which again has suffered due to the limited gen damage changes, but is still really good for keeping up pressure and giving some nice slowdown after a down. Finally, he has Cruel Limits, a super underrated perk that blocks all windows on the map each time a gen pops, and I would love to see more people showing this perk some love. At number 5, we have Hag, who has a super meta perk right now, Hex Ruin. Ruin has fallen far from its former glory, but being able to automatically regress generators without using the limited gen damages killers have access to is invaluable right now. She also has Devour, which can be one of the most insane perks in DBD once it's up and running, allowing you to mori survivors who have never even been hooked. And finally, she has Third Seal, applying blindness to every survivor you injure, which can be super impactful as well. For the final A tier killer, we have Clown at number 4. The Clown has 2 perks that are perfect for M1 killers. Bamboozle, which makes you vault faster and block windows you vault, and Pop to kick a decent chunk of progress off of a gen after you hook somebody. Pop has been done pretty dirty in recent times, but I'm hoping Behavior takes another look at it. The Clown also has Coulrophobia, which gives insanely hard healing skill checks while in the killer's tear radius, even though this probably won't get that much value in your games. To kick off the S tier and the start of the top 3, we have the Plague. The Plague is a perk that is almost completely essential if you're looking to win your games consistently in today's DBD. Corrupt Intervention. This perk blocks 3 generators farthest from you at the start of the game, and with the insane gen speed survivors have access to right now, this is completely invaluable and should absolutely be incorporated into killers' base kits if the devs continue to refuse to look at gen speed items and perks. She also has Infectious, which can be an amazing snowball perk, especially for insta-down or range killers, and Dark Devotion, which can be a super fun undetectable perk, passing the killer's tear radius onto the obsession on hit. At the number 2 spot, we have Pinhead, who has 3 phenomenal perks. Deadlock blocks generators passively each time one is completed, which can offer the killer an insane amount of free slowdown and doesn't require anything on the killer end. Plaything lights a new hex for each unique hook survivor, making them oblivious until they cleanse it, essentially turning any killer into a stealth killer. And Gift of Pain is huge in the current healing meta, slowing down heal speed and applying a massive gen debuff to survivors who choose to heal after being unhooked. And finally, at our number 1 spot, the killer with the best perks in the entire game, the Artist. This killer absolutely does not get enough love, but her perks sure do. artist has the perk Pain Resonance, which is the highest pick rate killer perk in the game for good reason. It is the only reliable killer slowdown perk left, and they still keep nerfing it even though no one's asking them to. Hopefully they stop that soon, so we have something to compete with 45-second generators, but her second perk is also built for this. Grim Embrace blocks the generators for 10 seconds on each unique survivor hook, and for 40 seconds after hooking the 4th survivor. This can buy a ton of time and allow the killer to gain the upper hand. And finally, the artist has Pentimento, a perk that can potentially give massive debuffs to the survivor team, or if they're smart, do absolutely nothing. But when Pentimento starts, it is deadly, giving survivors 30% gen slowdown on only 1 stack. And just to show you guys at the end here, again, these are all the killers in a row ranked by their perks from the F tier to the S tier. But that is going to do it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will catch you guys in the next one.